I used to believe Saturday mornings were my safe place, the one pocket of time where nothing could fall apart. The hum of the world slowed down, and for a few hours I could pretend life was simple again. That morning, the air over Willow Creek Park smelled like wet grass and maple bark, and the sun slipped through the trees in quiet ribbons of gold. I remember thinking, this is what peace feels like. But even peace, I would learn, can hold its breath before it breaks. My name is Ethan Collins, 42, a structural engineer who fixes things for a living, bridges roofs anything that cracks under pressure. Funny how I could rebuild steel, yet couldn't keep my own family from collapsing. 2 years after my divorce, I was still learning to live with the echo of what used to be a home. But Harper, my 6-year-old daughter, was the one thing that kept me anchored. That Saturday was hers. She had begged me all week to bring her to the park so she could finally ride without Daddy holding on. Her bike, a tiny pink Schwinn with white streamers on the handles, wobbled behind us in the truck bed as we drove down the quiet road into town. She sang along to some pop song on the radio, her voice off-key but full of joy. For a few precious minutes, I wasn't thinking about alimony payments or late-night arguments. I was just Dad. The park was mostly empty, just a few joggers, a golden retriever chasing a stick, the faint squeak of swings in the distance. I parked by the pond, helped Harper strap on her helmet, and adjusted the training wheels one last time. Her hands gripped the handlebars, tight little knuckles pale against the rubber. "You ready?" I asked. She nodded, eyes shining with that brave but scared look kids get when they want to grow up faster than they should. I started the camera on my phone, trying to capture what I thought would be another ordinary milestone. "Okay, sweetheart, remember what we practiced. Eyes up. Keep moving. I've got you." I ran beside her as the wheels began to spin, the crunch of gravel under my shoes, sinking with her breathless laughter. When she finally coasted on her own for a full 10 feet, I stopped running. She turned back, realizing my hands were gone, and screamed, half in panic, half in triumph, "Daddy, I'm doing it!" Her voice carried across the park, bright and alive. I was still catching my breath when I noticed him, a man sitting alone on a bench near the pond. He wore an old brown coat despite the mild weather, a navy cap pulled low, his shoulders hunched, as if under a private weight. At first, I thought he was just another lonely retiree enjoying the morning. But then I saw the way he was looking at us. Not casual, not passing. It was the kind of stare that carried history. His hands trembled in his lap, and when Harper laughed again, he lifted one hand to his mouth as if to steady something inside him. That's when I realized he wasn't smiling. He was crying. Something about the sight froze me. A stranger crying at the sound of my daughter's laughter. I told myself it was none of my business, but deep down, a cold unease began to stir. I didn't know it yet, but that man sitting quietly by the water was about to tear open a truth that had been buried in my family for nearly 40 years. Harper was still circling the path, her little legs pumping like pistons, when I noticed the faint click of a camera shutter. At first I thought it was just my phone glitching, but then I saw the old man again, still on that bench by the pond, his hands shaking around a vintage Nikon that looked older than me. The lens followed my daughter as she wobbled down the curve of the trail, sunlight catching the chrome rim each time he pressed the button. A chill crawled up my spine. Maybe it was parental instinct, that reflex that flares the second something feels off. "Stay right there, sweetheart," I called, trying to keep my voice even. She slowed to a stop, confusion wrinkling her forehead. I walked toward the man, each step landing heavier than the last. "Sir?" I said. When I got close enough, "Why are you taking pictures of my daughter?" He didn't answer right away. Up close, I could see how frail he was, skin. Paper-thin eyes, cloudy, but sharp, with something I couldn't name. His finger hovered over the camera, frozen mid-press. Then he looked up at me, and in a voice that cracked like old wood said, "She rides that bike the same way my little girl did, 40 years ago." The words stopped me cold. She even tilts her head to the right when she's scared. I used to tell Lila, "Straighten up, honey. Keep your eyes on the road." She never listened either. His smile tried to hold, but it broke halfway through. "I think you've got the wrong kid," I said, trying to sound firm but polite. "Please stop taking pictures." He nodded slowly, then reached into his coat pocket. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I shouldn't have. But please look at this." He pulled out a worn envelope and handed me a photograph wrapped in plastic. The edges were cracked, the colors faded into sepia tones, but what I saw in that small square of paper made the air leave my lungs. A little girl no more than 6 riding a red bicycle with white handles just like Harper's. And behind her, steadying the seat, was a young man with my face. Same hair, same crooked smile, same dimple under the left cheek. For a moment, the world narrowed to that photograph. Birds chirped somewhere far away, but I couldn't hear them over the rush of blood in my ears. I wanted to tell him it was impossible, that it had to be coincidence, but even my denial sounded hollow inside my head. "Where did you get this?" I finally asked, my voice smaller than I intended. He looked down at the photo, then back at me. "That was taken in the summer of 1985. My daughter and her boy. They vanished 2 weeks later." My throat tightened. Harper called out, "Daddy, are you okay?" I forced a smile toward her. "Yeah, baby, I'm fine." But my hands were shaking. The old man tucked the Nikon beside him, his eyes glistening. "You're the spitting image of him," he said softly. "Of my grandson." And that was the moment the park, the laughter, the sunlight, the calm stopped feeling safe. It felt like a stage, and I had just stepped into a play I didn't remember auditioning for. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The photograph hung between our trembling hands like something radioactive, beautiful, dangerous, impossible. My mind kept circling the date printed on the white border, May 1985. The numbers didn't make sense. That was before I was born. I forced out a laugh that sounded wrong even to my own ears. "That can't be right," I said. "That's what 40 years ago I wasn't even alive then." The old man nodded slowly, eyes glistening beneath the shadow of his cap. "I know what it says. I took it myself." His voice was soft, weighted with grief. "My name's Henry Walker. That's my daughter Lila. She disappeared that same summer. And so did her little boy." He said it so plainly that I almost missed it. Her little boy. I studied the picture again. The girl Lila had Harper's same wide grin, the same scattered freckles across her nose. Even the way her hair caught the sun was identical. For an instant it felt as if time had folded in on itself, echoing one life inside another. I tried to hand the photo back, desperate to reset whatever clock I'd just broken. "You must be mistaken. I don't know you or your family." Henry's hands closed gently over mine, stopping me. His grip was surprisingly steady now, the tremor gone. "I don't make mistakes about faces," he said. "I've looked for this one every day for 40 years. He reached into his coat again and pulled out another photograph, this one newer, but still decades old. Lila had a son. He would be about your age now. His name was Caleb Walker. My stomach dropped. The name hit something faint and half-buried inside me, a flicker of recognition I couldn't explain. Caleb. It rolled through my mind like a half-remembered lullaby. I shook my head. "Look, Mr. Walker, I think you've had me confused with someone else. My mother's name was Margaret Collins. We lived 2 states over. I've got birth records, school photos," he interrupted, voice cracking. I hired private investigators. I followed every lead. There were rumors she changed her name, that she took the boy to New Hampshire. Then nothing. It was like they vanished off the map. His eyes searched my face, pleading for something I didn't know if I had. Please, tell me, did your mother ever mention the name Lila or Walker? The sound of Harper's laughter floated back toward us, bright and innocent. It cut through the fog in my chest like sunlight through stained glass. No, I said quietly. She never did. Henry looked away toward the pond, the camera resting uselessly on his knee. I thought I'd made peace with not knowing, he whispered. But when I saw your little girl, I swear for a moment I thought time had given me a second chance. I wanted to walk away to take Harper home and forget all of this, but something, his voice, that photo, the name, wouldn't let go. Back then, I didn't realize that the man I was trying so hard to dismiss had just opened the first door in a hallway I didn't even know existed. And once that door opened, nothing in my life would ever fit the same again. I couldn't get that photograph out of my head. Even after I dropped Harper off at her mother's and told myself the whole encounter was just the rambling of a lonely old man, the image followed me home like a shadow that refused to fade. It was past midnight when I gave up pretending to sleep. The house felt too quiet, the kind of silence that hums in your ears and pulls old ghosts out of the walls. I made coffee I didn't need and went down to the basement where I kept the boxes of my mother's things. She'd passed away in 2016, but I'd never had the heart, or maybe the courage, to sort through what she left behind. My mother, Margaret Collins, had been a woman of routine, early riser, crossword lover, Sunday churchgoer. She had a way of making the world look smaller, safer, like nothing bad could reach us if we kept the doors locked and the curtains drawn. But Henry Walker's voice had cracked something open. Did your mother ever mention the name Lila? I found the box marked old papers under a stack of yellowing photo albums. Dust rose as I lifted the lid, the faint smell of cedar and perfume spilling out. Inside were bits of the life she'd kept carefully folded. Birthday cards, bills faded, Polaroids of me with missing front teeth. Then at the bottom, an envelope I didn't recognize, cream-colored edges worn soft by time. Across the front, in slanted blue ink, were the words, "Property of L.W." My stomach tightened. I turned the envelope over. The flap was already open. Inside were documents that shouldn't have existed, copies of a birth certificate. My birth certificate, only the name looked different. The original lines had been crossed out, replaced by my mother's careful handwriting, Ethan Collins. But beneath the ink, faint as a ghost, the first name was still visible. Caleb Walker. The room tilted. I sat down on the cold floor, the papers shaking in my hands. At the bottom of the envelope was a folded photo, my mother standing beside a younger Henry Walker. He looked the same, just stronger, steadier, the kind of man who once carried the world and lost it piece by piece. They were smiling sunlight behind them, arms around each other, like family. I don't know how long I sat there staring before the tears came. All those nights she told me we had no relatives left, that my father died in an accident, that we had to move for a fresh start. Lies spoken softly with love, but lies all the same. I whispered her name, Margaret Lila, whatever it truly was, and felt the word crumble in my mouth. I wanted to be angry, but all I could feel was a hollow ache. She hadn't stolen money or fame. She'd stolen truth. As dawn bled through the basement window, I realized what I had to do. The past wasn't buried. It was waiting. And the only way to face it was to return to the one man who still carried its weight. The next morning, the sky over Burlington hung low and gray, as if the world itself was holding its breath. I drove back to Willow Creek Park without music, without coffee, without a single clear thought, just the steady drum of rain tapping against the windshield. The envelope lay on the passenger seat beside me, its contents spread out like pieces of someone else's life. The altered birth certificate, the photo of my mother and Henry, the name that wasn't supposed to exist. By the time I pulled into the empty parking lot, the rain had softened to a drizzle. The same bench where I'd first seen him came into view, and there he was, Henry Walker, waiting camera on his lap like he hadn't moved since the day before. He looked up as I approached, and instead of surprise, there was only quiet recognition in his eyes. "I knew you'd come," he said simply. I stood there soaked and shaking, unsure whether I wanted answers or absolution. "You were right," I finally said. "About Lila. About the boy." Henry exhaled, his shoulders sagging with the kind of relief that looks a lot like grief. He gestured to the bench. "Sit, son. There's something you should know." I hesitated before sitting beside him. He spoke slowly, as if each word had to climb out of a lifetime of silence. "My wife Elaine, she passed about 5 years ago. She never stopped looking for Lila. Every Christmas, every birthday, she'd wrap a gift and leave it by the window, just in case." His voice wavered. "We didn't know what had driven her away. Not really. I blamed myself for a long time. I was hard on her, on everyone, too proud to see how scared she was." He reached into his pocket, hands trembling, and pulled out a small object wrapped in a handkerchief. When the detectives stopped searching, I held on to this. He unfolded the cloth to reveal a silver necklace tarnished with age. A heart-shaped pendant dangled from it, engraved with the letters C+L. The sight of it punched the air out of me. My hand went instinctively to my chest beneath my damp jacket. I wore a chain I hadn't taken off since childhood. I pulled it free, and there it was, the same pendant, the same inscription. Henry's eyes widened, and in that instant, decades of pain cracked open. "Oh God," he whispered. "It's you. Lila gave you this, didn't she? She told me once she'd give it to her boy so he'd never forget who he came from." The world blurred through my tears. "She told me she bought it at a flea market," I murmured. "Said it was just pretty." Henry's breath hitched, and then his voice broke into a sob that sounded more like a confession. "You're my grandson, Ethan. I lost your mother, and I lost you. I thought I'd die not knowing what became of either. I didn't move for a long time. Rain whispered against the pond, the trees, the bench. My whole life, every bedtime story, every family photo, every word my mother had spoken suddenly tilted, rearranging itself around this man beside me. When I finally spoke, my voice came out in a whisper. "I don't know how to be your grandson." Henry wiped his face with the back of his hand, managing a trembling smile. "You don't have to know, son. You just have to stay." For the first time since I was a boy, I let someone hold me while I cried. For days after that meeting, my world felt suspended, like gravity had forgotten me. I moved through my house like a stranger, touching things that no longer belonged to the same life. Every reflection I caught of myself, bathroom mirror, store window, car glass, looked like someone I didn't fully recognize. A man with another man's face. Henry had given me his number, written in a shaky hand on the back of a grocery receipt. He didn't push. He just said, "When you're ready." It took me 3 days to be ready. That morning I drove to the county records office, chasing the kind of truth you can't unknow once you find it. The clerk looked at me oddly when I requested hospital archives from the 1980s, but she didn't ask questions. A few hours later, I sat in the sterile glow of the reading room, scrolling through digitized records, my coffee long gone cold. It didn't take long to find her. Lila Walker admitted June 1985. Discharged under new identity, Margaret Collins. The notes were clinical, unemotional fractured ribs contusions, domestic violence suspected. My mother Lila hadn't just left. She had escaped. As I read, the pieces rearranged themselves in a pattern that made awful, perfect sense. Henry's drinking, the rumors, the fear in her eyes whenever someone raised their voice. She'd built an entire world on the ruins of her old one, and she'd done it to keep me safe. Still, part of me rebelled against that story. I wanted her to have trusted me with the truth. I wanted her to have believed that I could handle it. Instead, she'd rewritten both our lives, burying my name, my bloodline, and the man who'd given me half my face. That night I called Henry. My voice was steady, but my heart wasn't. "Can I come by?" He lived in a small apartment above an antique store downtown. When he opened the door, the smell of old books and coffee wrapped around me like a memory I didn't own. He looked smaller somehow, fragile, but clear-eyed. "I found the hospital records," I said. "She changed her name after she left. She was hurt." Henry nodded slowly. "I know. I read the police report back then. I was the man she was running from." He turned away, eyes glinting. "I wasn't violent toward her, but I was drunk most nights. The day she left, there was a fight at the bar. A man died. I was charged with manslaughter." I sat in stunned silence. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small bronze chip worn smooth around the edges. 30 years sober," he said, voice trembling. 30 years of waiting for a chance to say I was sorry. I looked at the chip in his palm, this tiny circle of repentance, and thought of my mother hiding behind new names, new walls. She hadn't just been running from him. She'd been running from me. The anger I'd carried all week began to dissolve, replaced by something quieter, something that felt dangerously like forgiveness. I reached across the table, covering his shaking hand with mine. "She'd want to know you made it here," I said. He smiled faintly. "Then maybe in some way she already does." For the first time in my life, the word family didn't feel like a wound. It felt like a door creaking open. A week later, Henry came by the house for the first time. It was late afternoon, the kind of Vermont spring day where the air smells like wet earth and thawing pine. Harper was in the backyard circling her little bike around the garden path, humming to herself. I watched Henry linger at the fence, clutching the strap of his old Nikon like it was the only thing keeping him steady. He looked different in daylight. Smaller, softer, humbled. The man who had carried 4 decades of guilt now stood just a few feet from the living proof of everything he'd lost and everything he'd been forgiven for. "Come on," I said quietly. "She's been practicing all week. She wants to show you." Henry hesitated, the camera trembling in his hands. "I haven't taken a photo of family in 40 years, he murmured. "Then start again," I told him. Harper spotted him instantly. "Grandpa Henry!" She called out, her voice bright as a bell. I didn't correct her. I couldn't. The word grandpa landed in the air like it had always belonged there. He waved, blinking hard. "Well, you better show me what you've got, sweetheart." And she did. She pedaled down the path, legs pumping, hair streaming behind her. The wind caught her laughter, carrying it into the trees. Henry lifted the camera, and the shutter began to sing, click, 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 capturing every wobble, every grin, every heartbeat of a moment that shouldn't have existed, but somehow did. I stood beside him, and for a second it felt like I was watching 2 timelines overlap, the past he'd lost and the present we were building. In his lens, I could almost see the ghost of another little girl, his daughter Lila, riding a red bike through another May afternoon. When Harper skidded to a stop, Henry wiped his eyes behind the camera. "She even sticks her tongue out when she's concentrating," he said, chuckling through tears. "Just like her grandmother." I went inside and came back holding something small, and worn a stuffed bear with one button eye and a patch on its belly. "This was mine," I said. "Mom called him Benny. I found him in the attic last month." Henry's hand flew to his mouth. "Benny," he whispered. "I bought that bear for Lila when she turned 10. She carried it everywhere. I thought it was lost when she ran." He reached out and touched the matted fur, his voice breaking. "She never left," he said softly. "She just wanted him to be safe." Harper came over, hugging the bear to her chest. "Can Benny live here with us now?" she asked. Henry nodded, smiling through the tears that refused to stop. "He already does, sweetheart." We stayed like that for a while, 3 generations, framed by the fading light, the air thick with the quiet kind of peace you don't talk about out loud. When Harper reached up and took Henry's hand in one of hers and mine in the other, something shifted, simple, small, but final. The circle had closed. Time, for once, had kept its promise. A few days later, Henry invited us to his apartment. Harper insisted on bringing Benny the bear tucked under her arm like a travel companion. The drive out to his place felt quieter than usual. Not heavy, just full. Every mile seemed to stitch together the distance between what had been lost and what had been found. Henry lived on the 2nd floor of a narrow brick building on the edge of town, above an antique store that smelled like cedar and dust. When he opened the door, I was hit by the warmth of it, books stacked high. The faint aroma of brewed coffee, a lifetime arranged in careful clutter. "I didn't clean up much," he said, embarrassed, rubbing his hands on his flannel shirt. "Didn't think I'd ever have company again." On the table near the window sat 3 cardboard boxes, each one labeled in the same neat handwriting, Lila Caleb, and letters unsent. Harper wandered toward the window, tracing her finger on the glass, while Henry and I stood over the boxes. He lifted the lid from the one marked letters unsent. Inside were envelopes, hundreds of them, some yellowed, some still crisp. "I wrote every birthday," he said quietly. "Every Christmas, every first day of school I imagined you might have had. I didn't know where to send them, so I kept them here. It helped me believe you were still out there somewhere." He handed me one. The paper was thin. The ink smudged. My throat tightened as I unfolded it. July 12, 1995. Dear Caleb, you're 8 today, at least in my mind. Maybe you like baseball, maybe you hate it. I hope your mom still sings to you at night. If you ever find this, know that I never stopped being your father. Even if you forgot, I remembered for both of us. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. I set the letter down and took his hand. You didn't lose us forever, Henry. You just ran out of places to look. He smiled, tired and tender, and now I've found more than I ever hoped for. Harper climbed into his lap, then holding Benny out to him. Grandpa Henry, she said, Mommy says when you miss someone you can talk to them in your heart. Did you do that? Henry brushed a strand of hair from her forehead, voice trembling. Every day, sweetheart. And I think today they finally answered. Outside, the light was fading to gold. We walked later down to the pond behind his building, the 3 of us. Harper skipped ahead, her laughter rippling over the water. Henry walked beside me slower now, but steadier than I'd ever seen him. I looked at them, past and future, somehow walking the same path, and thought of my mother, of the secrets she carried, and the love buried underneath them. Some truths don't fix the past, but they make tomorrow honest. And that evening, as the sun fell behind Willow Creek, I knew that was enough. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to share how it made you feel in the comments below. Tell us where you're watching from. We love hearing from viewers all around the world. Your words keep these stories alive. Don't forget to subscribe to Domestic Tragedy for more powerful real-life tales of family forgiveness and second chances.